my 18th birthday cake still sitting untouched on the granite counter. My golden brother Tyler stood smirking behind Dad, his arms crossed in satisfaction. Mom froze by the refrigerator, clutching a dish towel but saying absolutely nothing. All I had done was raise my voice when Tyler called me a failure, not worth celebrating in front of our entire extended family. Now Dad was screaming that I was no longer his daughter and demanding I pack my bags immediately. Blood dripped from my nose onto the tile floor as I realized my own family had just destroyed my life on what should have been my special day. Growing up as Blake Morrison in suburban Columbus, Ohio, I learned early that love in our household came with conditions I could never meet. While Tyler coasted through school with D averages and weekend drinking parties, I maintained a 4.0 GPA, worked 20 hours a week at Target, and volunteered at the local animal shelter. Yet somehow, Tyler remained the shining star, while I lived in perpetual shadow. Dad would beam with pride when Tyler managed to pass a basic math test, throwing $20 bills his way and promising special dinners. When I brought home honor roll certificates or academic achievement awards, Dad would glance at them briefly before tossing them aside and commenting that grades meant nothing in the real world. Mom would nod along, reinforcing whatever narrative kept peace in our household. Tyler discovered his power over me when we were younger. He learned that any complaint to our parents about my behavior, no matter how fabricated, would result in punishment for me and rewards for him. If Tyler broke something, he would claim I did it. If Tyler got in trouble at school, he would say I had influenced him somehow. The pattern became so predictable that I stopped defending myself, knowing it would only make things worse. This 18th birthday was supposed to mark a turning point. I had been accepted to Northwestern University with a partial academic scholarship covering 60% of my tuition. I planned to announce this achievement during dinner, hoping finally to earn some recognition from my parents. Grandma Morrison, Grandpa Joe, Aunt Linda, and Uncle Richard had all gathered to celebrate, bringing gifts and kind words about my bright future. Tyler arrived home 3 hours late, reeking of alcohol and stumbling through the front door. His bloodshot eyes immediately found me sitting at the dining room table, surrounded by family members who had been asking about my college plans. Without any provocation, Tyler launched into a verbal assault that stunned everyone into silence. "Look at little Miss Perfect sitting there like she owns the place," he slurred, pointing an unsteady finger in my direction. "Acting like she's better than all of us with her fancy grades and college applications. You think you're so smart, Blake, but you're just a stuck-up girl who nobody actually likes." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as our relatives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Grandma Morrison cleared her throat and suggested we focus on celebrating rather than arguing. But Tyler was just getting started, his voice growing louder and more hostile with each word. "She walks around here thinking she's going to be something special, but I know the truth. She's a failure that is not worth celebrating. All those books and studying, and for what she'll probably drop out of college in the first semester because she can't handle real life." Something inside me snapped. After 18 years of accepting verbal abuse, of swallowing cruel comments, and protecting my younger brother's fragile ego, I finally reached my breaking point. I stood up from my chair and looked Tyler directly in the eyes. "That's enough, Tyler. This is supposed to be my birthday dinner and you're drunk. Either sit down and show some respect for our family, or leave until you can behave like an adult." The room fell into deadly silence. I had never spoken to Tyler that way before, never challenged his right to treat me poorly in front of others. For a moment, even he seemed surprised by my response. But then his expression twisted into something uglier, and he opened his mouth to continue his attack. Before Tyler could speak again, Dad exploded from his seat at the head of the table. His face turned deep red, and his hands clenched into fists as he shouted at me with more rage than I had ever witnessed. "How dare you raise your voice at your brother in my house? Tyler is going through a difficult time, and instead of supporting him, you attack him like some kind of bully. You ungrateful, selfish girl." Dad's hand struck my face with such force that I stumbled sideways, knocking over my water glass. The liquid splashed across the white tablecloth as our relatives gasped in shock. Before I could regain my balance, Dad's fist connected with my cheek, sending me tumbling to the floor beside the china cabinet. "David, stop," Aunt Linda cried out, but Dad ignored her completely. "Get up and apologize to Tyler right now," Dad commanded, standing over me while I touched my throbbing face. "Then pack your things and get out of my house. You are no longer welcome here." I looked around the room at the horrified expressions of my grandparents, aunt, and uncle. None of them moved to help me. None of them challenged Dad's behavior or demanded an explanation. They simply sat in stunned silence, watching my world collapse. Mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Blake, maybe you should go upstairs and calm down. I'll get you a garbage bag for your clothes." As I struggled to my feet, tasting blood from my split lip, I heard Dad's voice change completely. He put his arm around Tyler's shoulders and spoke in gentle, encouraging tones that he had never used with me. "Don't let her upset you, son. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Some people think they're better than their family, but you and I know what really matters. How about we increase your allowance by $50 a week? You deserve it for putting that ungrateful girl in her place." Tyler's smirk widened as he basked in Dad's approval, and I realized this had been his plan all along. He had deliberately provoked me, knowing exactly how Dad would react. My own brother had orchestrated my destruction on my 18th birthday, and my parents had been willing participants in the cruelty. That first night in my beat-up 2006 Honda Civic felt like the longest of my life. I had parked in the back corner of a 24-hour Walmart parking lot, hoping security wouldn't notice me trying to sleep across the front seats. My face throbbed where Dad had hit me, and my split lip made eating difficult, but physical pain paled compared to the emotional devastation of being abandoned by my entire family. I had managed to stuff 3 garbage bags with clothes, textbooks, and personal items before Mom insisted I leave immediately. Dad sat in his recliner watching television, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Tyler had retreated to his bedroom, probably celebrating his victory. None of them looked at me as I carried my belongings to the car, and none of them said goodbye. The next few days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and desperation. I picked up extra shifts at Target, working every available hour to afford cheap motel rooms when I could manage it. On nights when money ran short, I returned to parking lots, moving locations frequently to avoid attracting attention. I showered at a Planet Fitness gym where I had maintained a $10 monthly membership, brushing my teeth in public restrooms and washing my hair in cold water. Maintaining my senior year grades while essentially homeless required tremendous effort and creativity. I completed homework assignments in the Target break room during my lunch breaks, charged my laptop at the library, and printed essays on the school computers before class. My teachers noticed my declining appearance, but I fabricated stories about being busy with college applications and part-time work. Mrs. Rodriguez, my guidance counselor, called me into her office during the second week after my birthday. She had known me since freshman year and could tell something was seriously wrong despite my attempts to appear normal. "Blake, I've been concerned about you lately," she said, gesturing for me to sit down across from her desk. "You look exhausted, and some of your teachers have mentioned that you seem distracted. Is everything okay at home?" I forced a smile and gave her the same lie I had been telling everyone else. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Rodriguez. I've just been working extra hours to save money for college, and I'm stressed about finishing my applications on time. Nothing I can't handle." She studied my face carefully, noting the faded bruise on my cheek that makeup couldn't completely hide. "Blake, if you need help with anything, you know you can talk to me, right? Sometimes students face challenges at home that make school more difficult." For a moment, I considered telling her the truth. But what could she do, call Child Protective Services on my 18th birthday when I was already legally an adult? Force my family to take me back when they clearly wanted nothing to do with me? I thanked her for her concern and promised to let her know if I needed assistance. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had lived next door to my family for 15 years, approached me while I was stocking shelves in the grocery section of Target. I recognized her immediately, but was surprised to see her there since she usually shopped at the smaller market closer to our neighborhood. "Blake, honey, I've been hoping to run into you," she said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "I witnessed what happened at your house 2 weeks ago, and I've been worried sick about you ever since." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm sorry if we disturbed you. Sometimes families have disagreements, but everything is fine now." She shook her head firmly, her gray eyes flashing with anger. "What I saw through my kitchen window was not a family disagreement, young lady. That was abuse, plain and simple. I watched your father attack you, and I've been kicking myself for not calling the police immediately." Her directness caught me off guard. For 2 weeks, I had been telling myself that maybe I had deserved what happened, that perhaps I really had been disrespectful and ungrateful. Hearing someone else validate my experience as abuse felt both relieving and terrifying. "I've been living alone since my husband Frank passed away 3 years ago." Mrs. Patterson continued studying my face carefully. "This big old house feels too empty sometimes, and I could use some company. I also noticed that your car has been missing from your parents' driveway since that awful night." I stared at her, unsure how to respond. Was she offering what I thought she was offering? "I have a guest bedroom that hasn't been used in months," she said, answering my unspoken question. "If you're interested, you could stay there in exchange for some light housekeeping and companionship. Nothing too demanding, just someone to talk to over coffee in the mornings and maybe help me with grocery shopping on weekends." My first instinct was suspicion. Adults in my life had consistently disappointed and betrayed me, so why should this elderly neighbor be any different? But as I looked into her kind face and remembered sleeping in my car for the past week, I realized I didn't have many alternatives. "Why would you want to help me?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Patterson smiled sadly. "Because I was 18 once dealing with family problems of my own. My father was an alcoholic who became violent when he drank, and my mother was too scared to protect me. I know what it feels like to be young and alone with nowhere to turn." That afternoon, I followed Mrs. Patterson's burgundy Buick to her Victorian-style house on Maple Street, just 2 blocks from where my family lived. She showed me to a cozy guest room decorated in soft blues and yellows, with a comfortable queen bed antique writing desk and large windows overlooking her flower garden. "The bathroom is right across the hall, and you're welcome to use the kitchen whenever you like," she explained, setting fresh towels on the dresser. "I eat dinner around 6 o'clock most evenings, and you're always welcome to join me, but there's no pressure if you have other plans." As I unpacked my 3 garbage bags of belongings, Mrs. Patterson surprised me with the depth of her understanding about my family situation. She'd been observing the Morrison household dynamics for years, witnessing interactions that most neighbors would have missed or ignored. "I taught elementary school for 35 years before I retired," she told me over cups of chamomile tea that evening. "I learned to recognize the signs of troubled families, and I've been concerned about your home environment for quite some time." She revealed that she had frequently seen Tyler stumbling home drunk on weekends. While I worked late shifts, noticed that I was often excluded from family outings and celebrations, and observed the way my parents treated my achievements with indifference, while praising Tyler for minor accomplishments. "I actually taught Tyler when he was in 3rd grade," Mrs. Patterson said, choosing her words carefully. Even then, it was clear that he had significant learning disabilities that weren't being addressed properly. Instead of getting him the special education services he needed, your parents seemed to blame everyone else for his struggles. This revelation stunned me. Throughout my childhood, Tyler's academic failures had been attributed to laziness or rebellion, never learning disabilities. Dad would rage at teachers who suggested Tyler needed extra help, insisting that they just didn't understand his son's unique learning style. "I tried to recommend appropriate interventions and testing," Mrs. Patterson continued, "but your father became hostile and accused me of labeling his son unfairly. The school administration was afraid to push the issue because of his aggressive behavior." As we talked late into the evening, I began to understand my family's dysfunction from an outside perspective. Mrs. Patterson helped me recognize patterns of emotional abuse and scapegoating that I had accepted as normal because they were all I had ever known. "Your father's treatment of you has nothing to do with your worth as a person," she said firmly. "Healthy parents celebrate their children's successes and support them through challenges. They don't pit siblings against each other or use physical violence to resolve conflicts." For the first time since my birthday disaster, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe my family's rejection didn't define my future. Maybe I could still pursue my dreams of college and independence. Maybe there were people in the world who would appreciate my efforts and treat me with kindness. But Mrs. Patterson's next revelation would shake my understanding of my family even more dramatically. "Blake, there's something else you need to know," she said hesitantly, setting down her teacup. "I've been debating whether to tell you this, but I think you deserve the truth. Over the years, I've overheard conversations between your parents that suggest your father knows Tyler has serious learning disabilities, but he's been covering them up by pressuring teachers and bribing tutors to give Tyler passing grades." The implications of this information hit me like a physical blow. Dad hadn't been protecting Tyler out of love or misguided support. He had been enabling Tyler's dysfunction while using me as a scapegoat to deflect attention from the family's real problems. Tyler's academic failures made Dad feel inadequate as a parent, so he had created a narrative where I was the problem child who made Tyler look bad through comparison. "I've been documenting some of these incidents over the years," Mrs. Patterson admitted quietly. "I never planned to get involved, but after what I witnessed on your birthday, I realized that someone needs to stand up for you." Mrs. Patterson's documentation proved more extensive than I could have imagined. The next morning, she led me to her home office and opened a filing cabinet filled with notebooks, photographs, and printed emails spanning several years. Her methodical approach to record-keeping reflected her background as an educator who understood the importance of evidence. I started keeping notes about 3 years ago when I noticed Tyler breaking into neighbors' cars. She explained pulling out a thick binder labeled with dates and times. "I called the police, but when they questioned your parents, your father claimed Tyler had been home all evening and accused the neighbors of targeting his son unfairly." She showed me photographs taken through her kitchen window of Tyler vandalizing property, drinking alcohol in the backyard, and engaging in other destructive behaviors that my parents had consistently denied or blamed on other teenagers in the neighborhood. Each incident was carefully documented with dates, times, and detailed descriptions. "Your father has been lying to school administrators, police officers, and neighbors for years to protect Tyler from consequences." Mrs. Patterson continued flipping through pages of handwritten observations. "Meanwhile, I've watched you leave for work at 6 in the morning, maintain perfect grades, and treat everyone with respect and kindness." The most damaging evidence related to Tyler's education. Mrs. Patterson had maintained contact with several former colleagues who still worked in the school district, and they had shared disturbing information about my family's interactions with teachers and administrators. Tyler should have been placed in special education programs when he was 8 years old. She told me, showing me copies of evaluation reports that had been buried by administrative pressure. He has documented learning disabilities in reading comprehension, mathematical reasoning, and attention regulation. With proper support, he could have learned coping strategies and academic accommodations. Instead, Dad had threatened legal action against any teacher or administrator who suggested Tyler needed special services. He had donated money to school athletic programs and volunteered for fundraising committees, creating relationships that made educators reluctant to challenge his demands for mainstream placement. When Tyler's grades began failing in middle school, your father started paying for private tutoring and test preparation services. Mrs. Patterson explained, showing me bank records she had obtained through connections in the education community. But instead of addressing Tyler's underlying learning disabilities, these tutors were essentially completing his assignments for him. The financial records revealed thousands of dollars spent on tutoring services, standardized test preparation, and even bribes to substitute teachers who would inflate Tyler's grades during regular teacher absences. Dad had been creating an elaborate fiction of Tyler's academic success while refusing to acknowledge or treat his genuine learning challenges. Meanwhile, my own educational achievements had been consistently minimized or ignored, despite requiring no additional financial investment or administrative intervention. Honor roll certificates were dismissed as meaningless. Academic awards were criticized as showing off. College scholarship opportunities were described as unrealistic dreams that would only lead to disappointment. "Your parents have been psychologically abusing you for years," Mrs. Patterson said bluntly, meeting my eyes across the desk. "They've used you as a scapegoat to avoid dealing with Tyler's real problems and your father's insecurities about being unable to fix his son's disabilities." As we reviewed the evidence together, I began calling Northwestern University's admissions office to confirm my acceptance status and explore additional financial aid options. Despite everything that had happened at home, my academic record remained strong enough to qualify for merit-based scholarships and need-based grants. The financial aid counselor, Jennifer Walsh, expressed concern when I explained my current housing situation and estrangement from my family. She connected me with campus resources for students experiencing family rejection, including emergency housing assistance and meal plan subsidies. "We see situations like yours more often than people realize," she told me during our phone conversation. "Students from dysfunctional families often face additional challenges when pursuing higher education, but there are support systems in place to help you succeed." While I was handling college preparations, Tyler began escalating his harassment campaign against me. He had somehow discovered where I was staying and began driving past Mrs. Patterson's house at all hours of the day and night. Sometimes, he would park across the street and sit in his car for extended periods, watching the house and taking photographs with his phone. The situation became more threatening when Tyler started leaving handwritten notes on my car windshield and Mrs. Patterson's front porch. The messages contained vague threats about making me sorry for embarrassing the family and warnings that I couldn't hide from consequences forever. "You think you're so smart living with that old woman," read one note I found tucked under my car's windshield wiper. "But I know where you work and where you sleep. You can't avoid me forever, and when I catch you alone, we're going to have a real conversation about respect." Mrs. Patterson insisted that we document every incident of harassment, photographing the notes, and recording the times when Tyler's car appeared in our neighborhood. She also suggested that we install security cameras around her property to capture evidence of any escalating behavior. "I've dealt with troubled students and their families throughout my career," she told me as we reviewed our growing collection of evidence. "Tyler's behavior is following a predictable pattern of escalation. He's testing boundaries to see what he can get away with before taking more serious action." Her prediction proved accurate when we discovered that Tyler had somehow obtained a spare key to Mrs. Patterson's house and had been entering the property when we were both away. We realized this when I returned from work one afternoon to find my bedroom had been searched and several personal items were missing, including my laptop computer and college acceptance letters. This constitutes criminal trespassing and theft. Mrs. Patterson declared immediately calling the police to file a report. "We have security footage of him entering the house and we can prove those items belong to you." Officer Maria Santos arrived within 30 minutes and took our report seriously, especially after reviewing the security camera footage and our documented history of Tyler's harassment. She explained that we had sufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges and could also apply for a restraining order to prevent future contact. Young adults from troubled families sometimes engage in escalating behaviors when they feel their control is being threatened, Officer Santos explained as she reviewed our evidence. "Your brother's actions suggest he's trying to sabotage your independence and force you back into your family's dysfunction." The security footage was particularly damning because it showed Tyler methodically searching through my belongings, clearly looking for specific items rather than randomly vandalizing the room. He had stolen my laptop, college documents, and several personal photographs, but had left behind jewelry and cash that would have been valuable to an ordinary burglar. This appears to be targeted harassment rather than random crime. Officer Santos concluded, making notes in her report. He was looking for items that would disrupt your education and emotional well-being, not things he could sell for money. As we prepared to pursue legal action against Tyler, Mrs. Patterson made a suggestion that would change everything. "I think it's time you contacted your father's younger brother, Marcus," she said quietly, pulling out a business card she had kept in her desk drawer. "He's been asking about you for years, and I suspect there are things about your family that you still don't know." Officer Santos worked efficiently to build a comprehensive case against Tyler, treating our situation with the seriousness it deserved. When she returned 2 days later with additional evidence gathered from the security footage, her expression was grim but determined. "We enhanced the video quality and were able to identify several specific items your brother stole," she explained, showing us printed screenshots from the recording. "More importantly, we caught audio of him making threats against you and Mrs. Patterson while he thought no one could hear him. The enhanced audio revealed Tyler muttering to himself as he ransacked my bedroom, making disturbing comments about teaching me a lesson and showing me what happens to girls who think they're better than their families. He had also made specific threats about Mrs. Patterson, calling her an interfering old woman who needed to mind her own business. These recordings give us evidence of premeditation and intent to intimidate." Officer Santos continued organizing the documentation into a formal case file. "Combined with your previous reports of harassment and the physical evidence of theft, we have grounds for multiple criminal charges." Mrs. Patterson's attorney, Robert Sullivan, had been practicing family and criminal law in Columbus for over 20 years and immediately understood the complexities of our situation. When he reviewed our evidence during our initial consultation, he seemed both impressed by our documentation and disturbed by Tyler's behavior patterns. "What you've documented here goes far beyond simple sibling rivalry or family disputes," he told us, spreading police reports and photographs across his conference table. "This represents a systematic campaign of harassment and intimidation designed to interfere with Blake's right to independence and education." Sullivan explained that Tyler's actions could be prosecuted under several different statutes, including criminal trespassing, theft, harassment, and stalking. The threatening notes and recorded comments would support charges of intimidation and terroristic threats, which carried serious legal consequences in Ohio. "More importantly, for your immediate safety," Sullivan added, "we can obtain emergency protective orders that would legally prohibit Tyler from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of your residence, workplace, or school." While we were building the criminal case against Tyler, the situation at my family's house was deteriorating rapidly. Dad had apparently been experiencing increasing pressure at his construction management job, with several major projects falling behind schedule and budget overruns, threatening the company's contracts. "Your father was laid off from Morrison Construction last week," Mrs. Patterson informed me after speaking with neighbors who worked in the same industry. The company cited poor project management and client complaints about his aggressive communication style. This information explained Dad's increasingly erratic behavior over the past several months, including his explosive reaction to my birthday confrontation with Tyler. Financial stress and professional failure had made him even more volatile and controlling, and my academic success had become a painful reminder of his own inadequacies. The financial pressure on my family became evident when Dad arrived at Mrs. Patterson's house, uninvited, demanding to speak with me about returning home and dropping all criminal charges against Tyler. Mrs. Patterson met him at the front door and refused to let him onto her property, but their conversation was captured by our security cameras. "Blake needs to come home right now and stop this ridiculous charade," Dad declared, his voice aggressive and demanding. "She's embarrassing our family with these lies about Tyler, and she needs to remember where her loyalties belong." Mrs. Patterson remained calm but firm in her response, explaining that I was an adult who could make my own decisions about where to live and how to handle legal matters. When Dad became increasingly hostile, she warned him that he was trespassing and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave immediately. "You interfering old woman have no right to come between a parent and his child," Dad shouted, moving closer to Mrs. Patterson in what appeared to be an attempt to intimidate her. Blake belongs with her family, and if you don't stop filling her head with lies, you're going to regret getting involved in our business. Fortunately, I was recording the entire interaction from inside the house while simultaneously calling 911 to report Dad's threatening behavior. When Officer Santos arrived 6 minutes later, she found Dad still standing on Mrs. Patterson's front porch, continuing to make demands and threats. "Sir, you're trespassing on private property and making threats against the residents," Officer Santos informed Dad as she approached with backup officers. "You need to leave immediately and you're prohibited from returning to this address." Dad's reaction to police intervention revealed the extent of his instability and lack of self-control. Instead of leaving quietly, he began shouting about his rights as a father and accusing the police of interfering in family business that was none of their concern. "That's my daughter in there, and I have every right to talk to her," Dad insisted, his face turning red with anger. "These people are filling her head with lies and turning her against her own family. I demand that you make them let me speak with Blake." Officer Santos remained professional but firm, explaining that I was an adult who had the right to choose where to live and whom to speak with. When Dad continued arguing and refused to leave the property, she placed him under arrest for criminal trespassing and making terroristic threats against an elderly resident. The arrest was recorded on police body cameras, providing additional evidence of Dad's inappropriate and threatening behavior. More importantly, the incident demonstrated that my family's dysfunction extended far beyond normal disagreements or generational conflicts. While Dad was being processed at the county jail, Mom unexpectedly contacted Mrs. Patterson's house and asked to speak with me privately. Her voice sounded shaky and frightened, completely different from the passive enabler I had known throughout my childhood. "Blake, I need to tell you some things about your father and Tyler that I should have said years ago," Mom said, quietly glancing around nervously, as if someone might be listening to our conversation. "I've been afraid to speak up, but watching your father get arrested made me realize how dangerous our situation has become." Mom revealed that Dad's behavior had been escalating for months before my birthday incident, with increasing episodes of verbal and physical aggression toward both her and Tyler. She'd been walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering his explosive temper while protecting Tyler from the worst of his father's rage. "Tyler has been getting more violent too," Mom admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Last month, he punched holes in his bedroom walls when I told him he needed to get a job. 2 weeks ago, he shoved me down when I asked him to clean up the kitchen. I'm starting to be afraid of both of them." The most shocking revelation was that Dad had been using our family's savings and credit accounts to cover gambling debts accumulated over the past 2 years. Mom showed me bank statements indicating that their checking and savings accounts had been depleted and they were facing foreclosure on the house within 90 days. "I found betting slips and casino receipts hidden in your father's desk," Mom said, pulling out copies of documents she had secretly photographed. "He's been going to the Riverboat Casino 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes losing hundreds of dollars in a single evening." This information explained Dad's increasing desperation and volatility, as well as his resentment toward my college plans and academic achievements. My success represented expenses and opportunities that he could no longer afford due to his gambling addiction, making my accomplishments painful reminders of his failures as a provider. But Mom's final revelation would completely reshape my understanding of our family dynamics. "Blake, there's something else I have to tell you, and it's going to be very difficult to hear," Mom said, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Your father isn't your biological parent. I had an affair 18 years ago with his younger brother Marcus, and you're Marcus's daughter." The room seemed to spin around me as I processed this information. Marcus Morrison was Dad's younger brother who had moved to California after college and built a successful technology company. He sent Christmas cards every year and always asked about me specifically, but I had assumed he was just being polite. "Marcus has never known that you're his daughter." Mom continued, tears streaming down her face. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was too scared to tell him the truth. I convinced David that the baby was his to save our marriage, and Marcus moved away before I started showing. The implications of this revelation were staggering. Dad had been raising another man's child while knowing the truth, which explained his differential treatment and underlying resentment toward me. Tyler wasn't really my brother. Marcus wasn't just my uncle. And my entire family structure had been built on lies and deception. "How long has Dad known the truth?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Mom's answer confirmed my worst fears about the calculated nature of Dad's abuse. "He found out when you were 10 years old," she admitted quietly. "You needed blood tests for a medical procedure, and the doctor mentioned that your blood type was incompatible with David's. He demanded a DNA test, and when the results came back, he knew you weren't his biological daughter." Rather than leave our family or confront Mom about her deception, Dad had chosen to stay in the marriage while psychologically punishing me for being evidence of his wife's infidelity. Every academic achievement, every moment of success or happiness had been met with hostility because I reminded him daily of his humiliation and failure. "Tyler has known the truth for 3 years." Mom continued, revealing the final piece of the puzzle. David told him during a drinking session, thinking it would help Tyler understand why he favored him. Instead, Tyler has been using the information to manipulate situations and make sure David continues treating you badly. My 18th birthday confrontation had been carefully orchestrated by Tyler, who knew exactly which buttons to push to trigger Dad's explosive reaction. Tyler had deliberately provoked me, knowing that Dad would side with his biological son against the daughter who represented betrayal and deception. As this information sank in, I realized that my entire childhood had been shaped by family secrets and psychological manipulation that went far beyond normal dysfunction. I had been scapegoated not just for being different, but for being living proof of problems that my parents refused to address honestly. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness," Mom said quietly, "but I want you to know that Marcus has been trying to maintain a relationship with you for years. David has been intercepting his letters and gifts telling Marcus that you weren't interested in staying in touch." The security footage from Tyler's break-in had captured him, stealing not just my laptop and college documents, but also a shoebox containing birthday cards and Christmas presents that Marcus had been sending throughout my childhood. Dad had been hiding evidence of Marcus's attempts to build a relationship with his daughter, ensuring that I would never discover the truth about my parentage. Mrs. Patterson, who had been listening to Mom's confession in stunned silence, finally spoke up with a suggestion that would change everything. "I think it's time we called Marcus and told him the truth about his daughter." That evening, Mrs. Patterson and I sat in her living room staring at the business card she had kept in her desk for years. Marcus Morrison's company, Tech Vision Solutions, was listed as a software development firm specializing in educational technology. His direct phone number was printed in elegant gray lettering below the company logo. "I've been wondering if I should contact him for months," Mrs. Patterson admitted, turning the card over in her weathered hands. "During your birthday incident, when I saw how cruelly your father treated you, I kept thinking that Marcus should know what kind of man was raising his daughter." Mom had provided Marcus's current address in Palo Alto along with information about his wife Jennifer and their 2 children, Emma and Lucas. According to Mom's research, Marcus had built his company from a startup in his garage to a successful business with over 200 employees and annual revenues in the millions. "He's been asking about you in every Christmas card for 18 years, Mom had told us during her confession. "He always wanted to know about your grades, your interests, your plans for the future." David would write back with vague responses and discourage Marcus from visiting or calling directly. I felt nauseated as I considered the implications of this deception. Marcus had been trying to build a relationship with his daughter for my entire life, but Dad had systematically prevented any meaningful contact. How many birthday presents had been intercepted? How many phone calls had been ignored? How many opportunities for connection had been deliberately sabotaged? With Mrs. Patterson's encouragement, I dialed Marcus's number at 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening, calculating that it would be 6 o'clock in California. My hands shook as I listened to the phone ring, unsure how to begin a conversation that would shatter everything Marcus thought he knew about his family. "Hello, this is Marcus," came a warm professional voice that sounded remarkably similar to my own. "Mr. Morrison, this is Blake. I'm David's daughter, and I'm calling from Ohio with some important information about our family." The pause that followed lasted only a few seconds, but I could hear the surprise and concern in Marcus's voice when he responded. "Blake, what a wonderful surprise. I was just thinking about you last week and wondering how your senior year was going. Is everything all right? You sound upset." His genuine warmth and immediate concern brought tears to my eyes. This was how a parent was supposed to respond to their child, with interest and care, rather than suspicion and hostility. "Mr. Morrison, I need to tell you something that's going to be very difficult to hear." I began taking a deep breath before continuing. "I'm not actually David's daughter. My mother had an affair 18 years ago, and you're my biological father." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Blake, are you certain about this information? This is not something that would be easy to verify or undo once it's been said." Over the next hour, I explained everything that had happened since my 18th birthday, including Dad's physical assault, my homelessness, Tyler's harassment campaign, and Mom's recent confession about the family's secrets. Mrs. Patterson occasionally added details or clarification, and I could hear Marcus taking notes as we talked. "I need to ask you some specific questions." Marcus said, his voice becoming more focused and analytical. "Has anyone in your family ever mentioned genetic testing or blood type incompatibilities? Have you noticed physical similarities between us that might have raised questions?" As we compared information about medical history, physical characteristics, and family traits, the evidence of our biological relationship became overwhelming. I had Marcus's unusual green eyes, his left-handed, writing preference, and his aptitude for mathematics and logical reasoning. None of these traits appeared in Dad's family line, and Tyler looked completely different from me, despite supposedly being my full sibling. "Blake, I want you to know that learning about you is not a burden or a problem," Marcus said firmly, his voice filled with emotion. "You are my daughter, and I've been hoping to build a meaningful relationship with you for your entire life. The fact that David has been preventing this is unconscionable." Marcus revealed that he had indeed been sending birthday presents, Christmas gifts, and letters throughout my childhood, always wondering why I never responded directly or seemed interested in developing a closer relationship. Dad had been responding to Marcus's communications with brief formal updates that discouraged further contact. "I sent you a laptop computer for your 16th birthday and a $5,000 check for your college fund last Christmas," Marcus told me, his voice growing angry as he realized the extent of Dad's deception. "David wrote back saying you had decided to focus on local community college options and wouldn't need expensive technology or significant financial support." The financial theft was even more extensive than I had imagined. Marcus had been contributing to what he thought was my college fund for years, sending money that Dad had diverted to cover gambling debts and family expenses. The total amount stolen exceeded $25,000, money that could have covered my entire undergraduate education. "I also sent you a smartphone 2 years ago with a note encouraging you to call me anytime you wanted to talk." Marcus continued, his voice breaking slightly. "When I never heard from you, I assumed you weren't interested in maintaining contact with your uncle in California." Mrs. Patterson and I exchanged glances as we realized that Tyler's break-in had probably been intended to steal evidence of Marcus's attempts to contact me. The shoebox Tyler had taken likely contained years of intercepted communications, gifts, and financial contributions that would prove Dad's systematic deception. "Marcus, there's something else you need to know about the current situation," I said, deciding to tell him about our legal case against Tyler and Dad's recent arrest for trespassing and making threats. When I finished explaining the criminal charges, protective orders, and documented evidence of harassment and abuse, Marcus was silent for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a determination I had never heard from any adult in my life. "Blake, I'm booking a flight to Columbus tomorrow morning, and I'm bringing my attorney with me. What David and Tyler have done to you is not just morally reprehensible, it's criminally actionable. We're going to make sure you're protected and that they face appropriate consequences for their behavior." The idea of meeting my biological father for the first time as an adult felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Marcus represented everything I had hoped a parent could be: successful, caring, protective, and genuinely interested in my welfare. But I had been disappointed by adults so many times that I struggled to believe this situation could really be different. "I know this is overwhelming," Marcus said, seeming to sense my uncertainty, "but I want you to understand that discovering you're my daughter is one of the most wonderful things that has ever happened to me. Jennifer and the kids are going to be absolutely delighted to learn they have an older sister." He explained that he had always regretted not having more children, especially daughters, and had often wondered what it would be like to guide a young person through the challenges of adolescence and early adulthood. Learning that he had been missing 18 years of his daughter's life filled him with both joy and profound sadness. "We're going to make up for lost time," Marcus promised, his voice filled with determination. "And we're going to make sure that David and Tyler can never hurt you again." The next morning, Marcus called to confirm that he was boarding a plane with his attorney, Richard Chen. I remembered the name Restriction and corrected this to Richard Williams, who specialized in family law and criminal justice cases. They would arrive in Columbus by early afternoon and wanted to meet immediately to review our evidence and plan our legal strategy. I've been researching Ohio's laws regarding parental fraud and financial theft, Marcus told me during our morning phone call. What David has done constitutes multiple felonies, and we have sufficient evidence to pursue both criminal charges and civil litigation. Mrs. Patterson had prepared her guest room for Marcus's visit, and I spent the morning organizing all of our documentation, police reports, and security footage into a comprehensive presentation. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a powerful advocate who would fight to protect my interests and ensure justice was served. As I waited for Marcus's arrival, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since my 18th birthday 3 weeks earlier. I had gone from being an abused, unwanted daughter to discovering that I had a successful, caring father who had been trying to reach me for years. The pain of my family's rejection was being replaced by anticipation of building genuine, healthy relationships. But the most important realization was that Dad's treatment of me had never been about my behavior, my achievements, or my worth as a person. His cruelty had been driven by his own psychological dysfunction, financial desperation, and resentment about problems he had created through his poor choices. Tyler's harassment campaign and Dad's escalating violence were final attempts to maintain control over a situation that had been built on lies from the beginning. They were trying to destroy my independence because my success threatened their narrative of family dysfunction and forced them to confront their own failures. When Marcus's rental car pulled into Mrs. Patterson's driveway that afternoon, I watched through the window as a tall, well-dressed man with familiar green eyes stepped onto the sidewalk. He looked exactly like an older male version of myself, and seeing him for the first time confirmed what I had known intellectually, but hadn't fully accepted emotionally. This was my real father, and he had come to rescue me. Marcus stood in Mrs. Patterson's living room studying the evidence we had assembled, his expression growing darker with each police report and security video. His attorney, Richard Williams, took detailed notes while reviewing bank records showing the theft of my college funds and documented history of Tyler's harassment campaign. This goes far beyond typical family dysfunction. Williams observed organizing our documentation into categories for potential legal action. We're looking at conspiracy to commit fraud, theft of funds intended for a minor criminal harassment, and systematic psychological abuse spanning multiple years. Marcus's reaction to learning the full extent of my mistreatment was unlike anything I had ever witnessed from an adult. Rather than making excuses or suggesting family reconciliation, he expressed pure protective rage at the people who had harmed his daughter. "They will face consequences for every single thing they've done to you," he stated, firmly meeting my eyes with an intensity that reminded me of my own determination. "David stole 18 years of our relationship, $25,000 of your college money, and subjected you to psychological torture. Tyler's behavior constitutes criminal stalking and intimidation. Neither of them will escape accountability." Williams explained that we could pursue multiple legal strategies simultaneously. Criminal charges would address Tyler's harassment and Dad's theft of my college funds. Civil litigation would seek monetary damages for psychological harm, educational costs, and punitive measures. Family court proceedings could establish Marcus's paternity rights and potentially expose additional financial fraud. The intercepted communications alone represent mail fraud and interference with familial relationships. Williams continued reviewing copies of letters and gifts Marcus had sent over the years. David's systematic deception prevented Blake from accessing financial support, emotional connection, and educational opportunities that were rightfully hers. While we planned legal strategy, Tyler made another critical mistake that would ultimately seal his fate. Apparently unaware that Marcus had arrived in Columbus, Tyler decided to escalate his harassment campaign by confronting me directly at my workplace. I was restocking shelves in Target's electronics department when Tyler appeared in the aisle, his face flushed with anger and his movements suggesting he had been drinking. He approached aggressively, backing me against the display case while speaking in a low, threatening voice. "You think you're so smart calling the cops on Dad and hiding out with that old lady," Tyler hissed, moving close enough that I could smell alcohol on his breath. "But you can't avoid me forever, and when I catch you alone, you're going to learn what happens to girls who betray their families." Fortunately, my manager had been watching the interaction from the customer service desk and immediately called security when she recognized Tyler from our previous incident reports. 2 loss prevention officers approached us while I activated the recording app on my phone to capture Tyler's threats. "Sir, you need to leave the store immediately." The senior security officer informed Tyler, positioning himself between us. "You're trespassing on private property and harassing an employee." Tyler's response revealed the depth of his psychological instability and lack of impulse control. Instead of leaving quietly, he began shouting about his rights and accusing me of lying about our family situation to gain sympathy from strangers. "She's my sister, and she's been spreading lies about our family to anyone who will listen." Tyler declared, his voice rising loud enough to attract attention from other customers. "I have every right to talk to her, and nobody can stop me from setting the record straight." The security officers remained calm but firm, explaining that I had filed harassment reports and that Tyler was legally prohibited from contacting me under the terms of our protective order. When Tyler continued arguing and refused to leave the store, they called the police and detained him until Officer Santos arrived. "Tyler Morrison, you're under arrest for violating a protective order, criminal trespassing, and making terroristic threats," Officer Santos announced as she approached with backup officers. "You have the right to remain silent." Tyler's arrest was captured on the store's security cameras and witnessed by dozens of customers and employees. More importantly, my phone recording had captured his explicit threats and admission that he had been deliberately targeting me for harassment. Marcus arrived at Target 30 minutes after Tyler's arrest, having been contacted by Mrs. Patterson about the incident. His first concern was my safety and emotional well-being, but his expression when he learned about Tyler's threats left no doubt about his protective instincts. "This ends now," Marcus declared, speaking with Williams by phone while we drove back to Mrs. Patterson's house. "Tyler just violated a court order in front of witnesses while making recorded threats against my daughter. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." That evening, Dad made his own catastrophic mistake by attempting to intimidate Marcus into dropping our legal case. Apparently unaware that Marcus was an experienced businessman with significant resources, Dad called Marcus's hotel room and demanded a face-to-face meeting to resolve our family's problems. Your daughter is causing trouble for my family with these ridiculous accusations and legal charges, Dad told Marcus during their recorded phone conversation. You need to convince her to come home and stop embarrassing us with this drama. Marcus's response was measured but devastating in its clarity and determination. David Blake is my daughter, not yours, and she will never return to an abusive household where she faces violence and psychological torture. You have stolen from her, lied to her, and subjected her to treatment that constitutes criminal abuse. The only conversation we need to have is in a courtroom where you can explain your behavior to a judge. Dad's reaction to learning that Marcus knew the truth about Blake's parentage revealed the depth of his desperation and irrationality. He began making threats about exposing family secrets and suggested that Marcus would regret interfering in situations he didn't understand. You have no idea what kind of problems you're creating for yourself, Dad warned, his voice becoming increasingly agitated. Blake is a troublemaker who turns people against their own families. If you're not careful, she'll destroy your life the same way she's destroyed mine. Marcus remained calm throughout Dad's tirade, but his final statement left no ambiguity about his position or intentions. David, you destroyed your own life through gambling, violence, and deception. Blake is an exceptional young woman who deserves love, support, and opportunity. I will spend whatever money and time necessary to ensure she receives justice and can build the future she's earned through her hard work and character. The next morning brought news that would effectively end Dad and Tyler's ability to continue their harassment campaign. Williams informed us that the district attorney's office had decided to pursue felony charges against both of them based on the overwhelming evidence of systematic abuse and criminal behavior. Tyler's arrest yesterday for violating the protective order was the final piece prosecutors needed to establish a pattern of escalating criminal conduct, Williams explained during our morning meeting. Combined with the theft charges, harassment documentation, and recorded threats, they're confident about securing convictions. More importantly, for my immediate future, Marcus had been working with Northwestern University's admissions and financial aid offices to ensure my college plans could proceed without interruption. He had agreed to cover all educational expenses not addressed by my academic scholarships, and the university had offered additional support services for students from troubled family backgrounds. You're going to attend Northwestern as planned, Marcus told me over breakfast at Mrs. Patterson's kitchen table. You'll have complete financial support, family encouragement, and legal protection from anyone who tries to interfere with your education. The final confrontation came when Dad, apparently unaware that Marcus was still in Columbus, decided to make one last attempt to force me back home. He arrived at Mrs. Patterson's house mid-morning, accompanied by two men I didn't recognize, and demanded that I come outside to discuss our family situation. Marcus answered the door with Williams and two private security officers he had hired to protect us during the legal proceedings. Dad's shock at seeing Marcus was immediately replaced by anger and accusations about outsiders interfering in family business. This is between me and my daughter, Dad declared, trying to push past Marcus to enter the house. You have no right to keep Blake away from her family. Marcus's response was calm, measured, and absolutely final. Blake is my daughter, not yours, and she is free to make her own decisions about relationships and living arrangements. You are trespassing on private property after being arrested for the same behavior last week. If you don't leave immediately, you will be arrested again. Dad's final mistake was attempting to physically confront Marcus, apparently believing he could intimidate a successful businessman the same way he had terrorized his family for years. When Dad raised his hand as if to strike Marcus, the security officers immediately intervened and restrained him, while Mrs. Patterson called the police. Tyler chose that moment to arrive at the scene, having been released on bail from his arrest the previous day. Seeing his father being detained by security officers, Tyler began shouting threats and accusations that were captured by multiple recording devices and witnessed by arriving police officers. "You people have destroyed our family," Tyler yelled, pointing at Marcus and me as police cars arrived with sirens blaring. "Blake is a liar who turns everyone against each other, and now you're helping her ruin our lives." Officer Santos arrived to find Dad and Tyler both making threats while being restrained by private security, Mrs. Patterson filming everything from her front porch, and Marcus calmly explaining the situation to backup officers. The contrast between Marcus's composed professionalism and my former family's chaotic aggression could not have been more stark. David Morrison, Tyler Morrison, you're both under arrest for violating protective orders, making terroristic threats, and criminal trespassing. Officer Santos announced as she approached with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. As police led Dad and Tyler away in separate patrol cars, I realized that my nightmare was finally ending. The people who had made my life miserable for 18 years were facing serious criminal charges, and I had found the loving, supportive father I had always hoped existed. Marcus put his arm around my shoulders as we watched the police cars disappear down Maple Street, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely safe and protected. It's over, Blake, Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with both sadness and determination. They can never hurt you again. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse lobby reading the final sentencing documents that would close this chapter of my life forever. Dad had been sentenced to 18 months in state prison for theft fraud and multiple counts of violating protective orders. Tyler received 1 year of supervised probation, mandatory anger management counseling, and community service, along with a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with me. The judge's comments about systematic family abuse and financial exploitation were exactly what we hoped to achieve. Richard Williams told Marcus and me as we reviewed the final paperwork. Both sentences include full restitution for the stolen college funds, plus additional damages for emotional distress and legal expenses. The financial recovery exceeded $35,000, covering not just the money Marcus had sent over the years, but also punitive damages for the psychological harm caused by Dad and Tyler's behavior. More importantly, both men were now prohibited by law from contacting me directly or indirectly, giving me legal protection to build my new life without fear of harassment. Mom had filed for divorce from Dad during his criminal trial, finally finding the courage to leave an abusive marriage after witnessing the legal consequences of his behavior. She entered intensive therapy to address her role as an enabler and began working as a nurse at Columbus General Hospital to support herself independently. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness for the years I failed to protect you, Mom told me during one of our carefully supervised meetings. But I want you to know that watching you stand up for yourself gave me the strength to finally leave an impossible situation. Our relationship remained complicated and limited, but I appreciated her willingness to acknowledge her mistakes and take responsibility for the harm she had caused through her passivity. Marcus suggested that family therapy might help us develop a healthier dynamic in the future, but only when I felt ready to explore that possibility. Tyler's experience with mandatory counseling had been surprisingly transformative. Away from Dad's enabling and family dysfunction, Tyler began receiving proper treatment for his learning disabilities and underlying anger management issues. His counselor helped him understand how he had been manipulated into playing a destructive role in our family's problems. Tyler sent you a letter through his probation officer. Williams informed me, handing over a sealed envelope. You're under no obligation to read it or respond, but his counselor thought it might provide some closure for both of you. The letter contained a genuine apology for Tyler's behavior and acknowledgement that he had been deliberately trying to sabotage my independence to protect his own position in our dysfunctional family. He expressed regret for the harassment campaign and hoped that someday I might be willing to have a conversation about building a healthier relationship. I wasn't ready for direct contact with Tyler, but his letter suggested that therapy was helping him develop genuine insight into our family's problems. Marcus encouraged me to consider the possibility that Tyler might genuinely change with proper support while maintaining firm boundaries until he demonstrated sustained improvement. People can grow and change when they're removed from toxic environments and given appropriate help, Marcus observed as we discussed Tyler's letter. But forgiveness doesn't require you to trust him or allow him back into your life until he's proven that the changes are real and permanent. My first year at Northwestern University exceeded every expectation I had harbored about college life and academic achievement. Free from family stress and financial worry, I threw myself into my business major while exploring elective courses in psychology, education, and technology. My grades remained excellent, and I developed close friendships with classmates who appreciated my work ethic and genuine personality. Marcus visited campus monthly, taking me to dinner and sharing stories about his own college experiences, while offering guidance about academic and career decisions. These conversations felt natural and comfortable, completely different from the tense, critical interactions I had endured with Dad throughout my childhood. "You remind me so much of myself at your age," Marcus told me during one of our dinners near campus. "Ambitious, hardworking, and determined to create opportunities for yourself, rather than waiting for others to provide them." He introduced me to Jennifer and my half-siblings Emma and Lucas during spring break when I flew to California to visit their family. Emma, who was 14, immediately bonded with me over shared interests in reading and music, while 12-year-old Lucas appreciated having an older sister who could help him with homework and offer advice about middle school challenges. "It feels like you've always been part of our family," Jennifer told me warmly as we prepared dinner together in their modern kitchen overlooking the San Francisco Bay. "The kids have been asking about their big sister for months, and Marcus talks about you constantly." During my summer vacation, Marcus offered me an internship at Tech Vision Solutions, where I worked in the marketing department developing educational technology products for middle and high school students. The experience gave me valuable professional skills while allowing me to contribute to projects that would help students facing academic challenges similar to Tyler's learning disabilities. "Your insights about the student experience have been invaluable for our product development team," Marcus told me during my internship evaluation. "You understand the challenges that young people face in ways that our other employees simply can't replicate." Mrs. Patterson had become like a beloved grandmother, maintaining her guest room for my visits home from college and celebrating my achievements with genuine pride and affection. She moved to a smaller apartment closer to campus during my sophomore year, claiming she wanted to be available for family dinners and holidays. "Watching you succeed has been one of the greatest joys of my retirement," Mrs. Patterson told me as we decorated her Christmas tree during my first semester break. "You've become the granddaughter I always hoped to have, and I'm so proud of the strong, independent woman you've become." By my junior year, I had decided to pursue an MBA with a focus on educational technology planning to eventually work with Marcus's company, developing products that would help students with learning disabilities access appropriate academic support. My own experience with family dysfunction and Tyler's struggles with undiagnosed learning challenges had given me unique insights into the barriers that prevent young people from reaching their potential. I want to create technology solutions that help students like Tyler get the support they need before their problems become overwhelming. I explained to Marcus during one of our career planning conversations. Too many families struggle with educational challenges because they don't understand available resources or feel stigmatized by seeking help. Marcus encouraged my career goals while emphasizing that I should pursue whatever path brought me fulfillment and purpose rather than feeling obligated to join his company. He had already begun mentoring me toward potential leadership roles in educational technology, but he wanted me to develop my own professional identity and expertise first. During my senior year, I received an unexpected letter from Tyler through his probation officer informing me that he had completed community college with a degree in automotive technology and was working as a certified mechanic at a local garage. His learning disabilities were being managed through appropriate accommodations, and he had maintained sobriety for over 2 years. "I know I have no right to ask anything from you after what I did," Tyler wrote, "but I wanted you to know that I'm grateful you stood up for yourself when nobody else would. Watching Dad and me face consequences for our behavior was the wake-up call I needed to get my life together." He requested permission to send occasional updates about his progress through his probation officer, without expecting responses or direct contact. Tyler understood that rebuilding any kind of relationship would require years of consistent change, and that I had no obligation to forgive or trust him. I discussed Tyler's letter with my college counselor and decided to allow the supervised communication, recognizing that his progress was encouraging, while maintaining firm boundaries about direct contact. Marcus supported my decision, while emphasizing that forgiveness was entirely my choice and timeline. Mom's recovery had been slower but steady. She completed her nursing degree, found stable employment, and maintained her own apartment while attending weekly therapy sessions. Our relationship remained limited to occasional supervised meetings, but she had stopped making excuses for Dad's behavior and accepted responsibility for her role in enabling family dysfunction. "I can't undo the years I failed to protect you," Mom told me during our final supervised meeting before I graduated from college. "But I want you to know that watching you succeed has helped me understand what real strength and courage look like." The day of my college graduation felt like the culmination of everything I had worked toward since that devastating 18th birthday, 3.5 years earlier. Marcus, Jennifer, Emma Lucas, and Mrs. Patterson filled an entire row in the auditorium, cheering enthusiastically as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma summa cum laude. As valedictorian of Northwestern's business school, I had been selected to give the graduation speech to my fellow students and their families. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, I felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. 3.5 years ago, I thought my life was over. I began my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium sound system. I was homeless, rejected by my family, and convinced that my dreams of education and independence were impossible fantasies. I shared the story of discovering that speaking up for myself was the first step toward creating the life I deserved, emphasizing that toxic relationships don't define our worth, and that courage often means walking away from situations that harm us. The people who told me I was worthless and would never amount to anything were wrong. I continued making eye contact with Marcus in the audience. But more importantly, I learned that their opinions had nothing to do with my actual value as a person. The speech concluded with reflections on the importance of building chosen families with people who celebrate our successes and support our growth, rather than accepting relationships that diminish our potential or demand that we make ourselves smaller to accommodate others' insecurities. Each of you has the power to choose relationships that honor your worth and support your dreams, I told my classmates as applause filled the auditorium. Sometimes that means walking away from people who claim to love us but treat us badly. Sometimes it means taking risks to build connections with people who truly see and appreciate who we are. After the ceremony, Marcus approached me with tears in his eyes and pride written across his face. "I have never been more proud to call someone my daughter," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "You've become everything I hoped you could be, and more than I ever imagined possible." Mrs. Patterson wiped away tears as she congratulated me, expressing amazement at how far I had come since that terrible night when she found me sleeping in my car behind Walmart. "You've taught this old teacher that sometimes the most important lesson is learning when to fight for yourself," she told me, squeezing my hands warmly. "I'm so grateful I was able to witness your transformation and be part of your journey." As we celebrated at dinner that evening, I reflected on the profound life lesson my experience had taught me. While we cannot choose our circumstances or control how others treat us, we always have the power to decide how we respond to adversity and what kind of future we want to create. Speaking up for myself on my 18th birthday had felt terrifying and dangerous, but it became the moment that changed everything. Learning to recognize my worth and demand respectful treatment had opened doors to relationships, opportunities, and possibilities I never could have imagined while trapped in my family's dysfunction. The people who had tried to convince me I was worthless and destined for failure had been projecting their own insecurities and inadequacies onto me. Dad's gambling addiction, Tyler's learning disabilities, and Mom's enabling behavior had created a toxic environment where my success threatened their narrative of family problems being insurmountable. By refusing to accept their treatment and seeking help from people who recognized my potential, I had discovered that there were adults in the world who would protect, encourage, and celebrate young people, rather than tearing them down to maintain their own sense of control. Now, as I prepared to begin graduate school with full financial support from my loving father and chosen family, I understood that my journey was just beginning. The strength I had developed through surviving family abuse would help me face future challenges with confidence and resilience. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to walk away from toxic family relationships in order to protect your own well-being and pursue your dreams? Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us most actually hold us back from becoming who we're meant to be. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more family revenge stories about standing up for yourself and creating the life you deserve. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them, and leave a comment about your own experiences with choosing healthy relationships over toxic family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you have the power to write your own ending, no matter how difficult your beginning might have been.